right, let's call to order the October 20, 2021 TPSA regular board meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And Rochelle, if you could do roll call.
Director Tresson?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Present.
Director Cox?
Yes.
Director Smelser?
Yes.
And President Wilkins?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next on our agenda is public comment. So this is an opportunity for anyone to address the board for up to 3 minutes on any items not on the agenda. Is there any public comment this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Next on the agenda is professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries.
Vicki could not attend today, so I will be taking this forward. On the agenda, what we have is just the Safety Suggestion Awards. We do not have any anniversaries or other professional achievements. Just as a reminder, the process for the Safety Suggestion Awards is the staff provide safety suggestions anonymously. Well, they provide them in a box, and then our safety officer collects them. He presents them to our safety committee as anonymous recommendations. The committee votes on them, and if they're awarded, then the recipients receive 2 hours of administrative leave for that. So to summarize the awards here, we have Anthony Salinas. He received 4. Scott Fleming, 1. Ryan, 1. Jesse, 1. Tobin Fuchs, 1. And Scott Wilcox, 2. Unfortunately, a lot of the staff are not here, and those that are here, they're out in the field trying to prepare for the storm coming. So I just wanted to thank them for their continued commitment to safety, and it's good to see that the staff are still engaged.
Great. Thanks, Lou. Thanks to all the staff. All right, next is our consent agenda. We've got 4 items on consent. Were there any board members who have any items they wish to pull? Any staff have any items they wish to pull? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved by Cox, second by Lewis. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? Great. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a report from the September 15th, 2021 closed session meeting.
Thank you. At the conclusion of September 15, 2021 board meeting, the closed session, there was no report, so I would let you know that there was no action taken at the conclusion of that closed session.
Great. And there's no action on that. It's just a report out from the closed session. Okay.
And one thing, Chairman Wilkins and LaRue, now that it's after October 1 and the Brown Act rules have changed, we're back to the old rules pretty much. We'll start doing that at the end of the actual closed session.
Okay.
Moving forward, we'll stop. This was sort of a COVID thing from Zoom because nobody was there at the end of the Zoom call, but now we'll revert to the old practices of at the end of the closed session, we will reconvene in open session, make an announcement at that meeting. Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda are the minutes from the September 15th special board meeting, from the September 15th regular board meeting and the October 11th, 2021 special board meeting. Is anyone? Yes, Lou.
I just wanted to make a change for the October 11th board meeting.
Okay.
On the second page, it states under the regular agenda, Director Wilkins stated there was no need to report. That should be nothing.
Right.
So that has been changed.
Yep.
I have one as well. Also, after I made that change, I noticed there was, actually I changed it before I printed it. There originally was no space between 2021 and closed, but I guess I changed it before I added it into the packet. So
Okay.
disregard that.
Any other comments or requested modifications to the minutes?
I'll make the motion of approval with the addition.
All right. Thanks, Lane.
I'll second.
Second by Cox. Any further discussion? Seeing none, no public comment. Those in favor of approving the September 15th and October 11th minutes as modified, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, thank you. Item 3, consideration of establishing a standing finance committee. Lou?
Yes, at the last board meeting, there was discussion of potentially creating a standing finance committee. So this agenda item was set up for that discussion. Currently, all of our member districts have a finance committee. I think the agency could benefit from one. We do have periodic questions from our board packets from the board of directors, so having a finance committee prior to our board meeting would solve those. Additionally, the finance committee could perform some other duties, such as approving the warrants, which would still require overall approval by the board, reviewing and approving financial statements, providing some input on financial business, such as the annual budget preparations, the unfunded accrued liability payment structures, what have you, and provide feedback on what they would like to see in the upcoming board meetings. So there's a write-up here. We do recommend that if there is going to be a standing finance committee, that there's some scope to find, identify the committee members and the committee meeting. For instance, the scope, like I stated, we request that the committee be afforded the authority to approve financial warrants, financial statements, and be able to direct staff on financial business. As it pertains to committee members, we recommend that there be 2 board of directors be appointed annually. On the staff side, we have the general manager, executive secretary, board clerk, finance and administrative manager, and accounting supervisor to attend the same committee meetings. And that we recommend that the committee meetings be held monthly, the week before the board of directors, regularly scheduled board of directors meeting. So with that, I anticipate that there'll be discussion. If there's any feedback that the board would like, then we will put it up to see if the board would like to create that committee.
Okay, thanks, Lou.
You know, in reading that, I mean, the most helpful, I think, would be, you know, the before when we're approving the yearly budget, that would deal with the most amount of time with the finance committee. And I don't know if we need it every month. I mean, I'd at least do it every quarterly. But unless there are specific items that come up with regards to the finance issue, I know the time that we spend dissecting the annual budget would be very helpful to have a report from the committee to the board and go over the things that concern us before the presentation too, so we can report to the board the issues of finance that the board should be aware of. So I don't know. Every month, maybe, but you know, I'd say at least quarterly, and have that set. But probably the main function will be for the annual budget.
Okay. Other comments?
I kind of echo what Lane has to say, given the fact that when we review the annual budget at the 2 board meetings preceding the finalization of the budget, there's just such a barrage of numbers and figures that get to be, for me anyway, get to be a little bit overwhelming. And I'd like to see Blake, seeing as how he's our numbers man, sit back and I don't want to you know, volunteer your services, Blake, but you're right on top of the numbers when we review the annual budget, and the work that you do and the expertise that you have makes it a fitting person to sit back and do one of those quarterly meetings and be able to sit back and maybe ease the pressure on people like me that get a little bit overwhelmed. And I agree with what Lane says. Quarterly would be in order, but specifically when we start reviewing the budget, that's when it gets really intense, and I think a quarterly meeting would be in order, and I agree with Lane.
You know, the thing that I brought up as far as quarterly too, I mean, reporting, you know, year to date where we are, on a quarterly, I think is all that would be required. I mean, that who's ever on the finance committee goes over those issues and reports back to the board where we are on a quarterly basis.
And there's other things that, it's just not only the review of the annual budget. When we deal with the insurance policies and employees' benefits and the things like that have a direct effect on the budget, these numbers, I feel, are very important to the board. And to sit back and have the whole board get immersed in that kind of complexity, I think that it could be better served that if we have a committee to be able to not only review the budget, but to review some of the other financial things that impact the budget, such as the wages and employee benefits and retirement and a lot of the other things that we've been dealing with over the past couple of years that really take a lot of board time at our board meetings. So I would be in favor of a committee, but quarterly I think would be a little bit less stressful to the people that are on the committee.
Okay, Blake? I think, with $40 million of assets in the bank and, hundreds of millions of dollars with assets here, and, just some of the issues you raised, the insurance, the budget, we've got outstanding liabilities for pension, health. I think it would be helpful to do it. I would love to get to a point where it's quarterly, just because it would reduce the load on staff primarily and secondarily on the standing committee. But I would recommend that we go with monthly to begin with and see how it is, and we can always modify, if this is something we adopt by resolution. I'm not sure exactly how the standing committee gets, codified into it, but, it would be great to get to a spot where quarterly is good, but I think quarterly is tough. I mean, if we meet and then you're not meeting again for 3 months, it's hard to have an ongoing conversation on some of these items. And so I'd like to start monthly and, with the goal of hopefully, getting to a point where we realize this is too frequent. We don't need to meet this often, and perhaps quarterly is better. But my recommendation would be to meet monthly to begin with and see if there's, if that's just too frequent, change it at that point. I'd rather err towards more frequent to begin with than less frequent.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Crystal, as far as how much time is involved in setting up the meeting, whether you feel necessary for a monthly or a quarterly. You're a finance person, and how many questions do you have coming up that for the committee to address before a board meeting? How helpful would that be to you as far as your preparation?
Well, as far as being able to address questions before the board meeting, it's been nice that Blake's been giving us feedback on that when we send the financials out to him. So he's been asking questions in advance. I'm all for the suggestion of monthly until we kind of establish more of what we want the finance committee to accomplish. It would be really good to, even if we get to quarterly meetings, probably schedule a couple of monthly meetings before the budget. So in a year's time, 2 years' time, quarterly during the quieter time of the year, and then in budget season, because budget season is generally 2 to 3 months before you even present it, and then a couple of passes after that. Plus, with upcoming potential investment opportunities and that sort of thing, because that's right around the corner. So, and it would be nice to be able to sit a little bit more one-on-one with a couple of the board members instead of the back and forth in emails and getting my questions here or direction here, so that we can just kind of bounce it off of each other and brainstorm when we need to and kind of talk more openly. And ideally, quarterly reporting is actually a really good thing. With I didn't hear you completely. quarterly reporting, the year-to-date, that sort of thing. Not really sure if that's what you were saying, but that is something I am very used to and familiar with.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's more beneficial.
right. I mean, it's important for for the committee then to report to the board from the information that we have presented to us on a quarterly basis where we are year to date, so we know how to with regards to the budget and where we are, so we could give that information to the board, and so the board can then have the ability to react to any situation that is coming forward with it. Say we got a huge, like insurance. I mean that could be, or the unfunded liabilities. I mean, those issues are coming to us all the time as far as in looking into what it's going to be for the COLA requirements and how that's going to affect the budget this next year and things like that. These are things that we need to look at in advance before they get to us also. So,
And
Dave?
sorry.
Yeah, Alpine has a standing finance committee that meets every month. And from the day I got on the board, I just struggled with the financials and how they do it in Alpine. It's pretty over the top, I thought. But anyway, the committee's real helpful. And they meet every month, day before the board meeting. Works for us.
Okay.
If we're going to meet, I like the monthly meeting because trying to time activities and discussions on a quarterly basis may not align itself all the time. So we do have some potential exits, some pensions to contend with, some liabilities to contend with, some potential refinancing options. So if we're going to do this, I'd recommend that we commence with the monthly meeting, and then as we progress down, then consider talking about the quarterly meeting. I'm just concerned. Well, I don't want to wait 2 months to have a quarterly meeting to address a financial discussion.
Okay. Dale, good job.
I think that Blake's hitting the nail right on the head. Same thing with Lane. I think that a finance committee does streamline the process at a regular board meeting. I think a lot of the issues that come up in the finance committee meeting are very important, and that the whole board should be aware of what's going on. However, to sit back and try and digest all the things that come up financially at a regular board meeting can be very time consuming, and I think it would be well served to have a finance committee. And so the details now is who's gonna volunteer, and if they meet every month, when.
Right, so it sounds like there's consensus that forming a finance committee would be beneficial from the board's perspective. Sounds like there was a couple of different opinions on monthly versus quarterly. I think, staff is suggesting monthly would be most appropriate. Are other board members comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So then that would lead us down to who's on the committee.
I'll nominate Blake.
Thanks, Lane, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. Do you want to be on the committee, Blake?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got stuff that I'd love to.
Are there other board members who would like to be on the committee?
I know you've got, Lane, you've always shown interest in matters financial, so I was thinking it'd be good to serve on with you. I don't know if anybody else.
Payback, yeah.
Payback, huh?
I would do it.
I know you've got travel stuff until another week.
But we can do it remote. We can do it remotely.
If we can do it remotely, which I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
Yeah. What I would suggest too is maybe we have 2 members sitting on it and 1 alternate.
If I may, you still have to comply with the rules of regular meetings, correct?
Yes, this would be a Brown Act committee, so you'd have to follow the Brown Act rules on scheduling meetings.
So you'd have to do the posting for remote.
Correct.
But we can do that.
You can do that, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you're willing to do it?
I'll do it.
And the idea of an alternative is not a bad one also.
Right.
So Dave, I didn't want to leave you or Dale out. You guys.
What about yourself there, Dan? Don't leave yourself out.
I just always think the president of the board has enough responsibility, and it should be one of the two of you that be the alternate.
I'll volunteer to be an alternate.
Okay, you good with that, Dave?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Do we
I've got
need
enough on my
what?
plate.
Do we need to action of the board? I would assume to create the committee and then appoint the board members to it.
Yes, you do. You don't have any board policy on establishing committees, so it requires board action. You can either just approve the committee formation as recommended in the staff report, which is pretty detailed. It's got all the information and the scope.
Okay.
Or if you prefer something formal, you could direct staff to come back with a resolution.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with just approving the staff report recommendation.
Okay, Ruth?
Yeah, did you want to identify a time?
I would suggest that the committee members and staff figure that out offline, so we're not prescribing it, if that works.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we form a finance committee, that we meet once a month, that Blake and Lane are the committee personnel, and that I'll volunteer as an alternate.
Okay. And that would be to form a committee as outlined in the staff report?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Dave Smeltzer. Any further discussion? And there's no public comment? Okay. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Not opposed. I keep raising my hand, thinking the ones that are still. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. Next on the agenda is discussion of content and organization of board packets.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up from last month's board meeting, there was discussion about what's in the board packet, specifically as pertaining to progress pay estimates and construction contract change orders. That led to also a brief discussion or comment about the level of detail of the board packet. So that's what this agenda item is for. The staff report provides a little bit of a background on what we currently do, and then the idea is to have a discussion and to get some feedback from board directors on how you'd like us to proceed moving forward. So as it addresses the progress pay estimates, there is no requirement for us to bring it to the board on an individual agenda item. The contract already defines how the contractor is going to get paid. We can include the pay estimates in the general funds like we do any other invoices, and then the general manager can provide a monthly report if that's the direction we want to go there. When it comes to construction contract change orders, we already have a resolution in place, so that's already predefined, and they're listed here. Just to sum them up, the general manager has the authority to approve a change order that does not result in any change to the contract price, shortens or extends the scheduled construction completion date, as long as the schedule is not changed by excess of 60 days, and that the GM has the authority to approve the change orders if the cumulative net amount is less than $25,000. Additionally, in the resolution, the general manager has to provide a report for anything coming to the board of directors for the change orders approved, and that if there's anything that's not included in those three items listed above, then the board of directors has to approve that. If there is going to be a change to the construction change orders, because there are times where there could be delays in contracts in construction if there's a change order. So if you issue a field order, you still have to follow it with a change order, so you made a commitment to the contractor. The board could go back and amend the current resolution for the general manager. Just so you know, there's been very minimal instances where we've had to bring a change order to the board. So this isn't a big pressing issue. But if we wanted to make sure that we don't have to post any delays or cause any additional fees for the contractor, we should amend the change order. If that's the case, we recommend, at least I recommend, that the change order value be amended to be $50,000. And I put 20% of the construction contract amount, really should be 10%, which is a norm in my experience. So that's a change if you want to do that for the contract change orders. And then for the board packet detail, quite frankly, I include everything that I think that's appropriate for the discussion. Sometimes it could be very detailed and some not. So I'm aware of the fact that it makes lengthy board packets, but that's what I feel is appropriate. And whatever you guys love the detail would like, just let us know and we can provide for it. So that just kind of summarizes the discussion points from last month. And if you guys want to provide details on what you'd like to have moving forward, any proposed changes, we'll do so for you.
Great. Thanks, LaRue. I'll start. I think I was the person who raised this, and it was really, the reason I raised it is I think it's always good for us to make sure that information that we're asking staff to develop, which takes time and effort, is information that we actually need. I know I personally, when it relates to construction activity, from my perspective, once we as a board have decided we're going to pursue a project, we've awarded it to a contractor, and we've assigned staff to make the construction contract happen. I really don't need the monthly reports on how much we spent that month on a given contract. I don't need the details on smaller change orders. I'm comfortable with staff's ability to take care of that. So that was the reason I brought it up. Is there was a question in my mind as to whether or not we were creating busy work for our staff, or if it was just me. Maybe other board members do have a preference to see that next level of information that we have been getting in our board packets, and if that's the case, that's fine. I just thought I'd raise the question, make sure we're not doing a bunch of busy work unnecessarily. So with that, I'll stop and request any other thoughts from other board members.
I've got a question to ask the rest of the board members. In regards to changing the amounts from $25,000 to $50,000 on discretionary approvals, $50,000 is a lot of money, and it's granted that we do have a lot of times when there's some change orders that come, on any given number of projects, and I'm comfortable with a $25,000 limit for LaRue to be able to have a discretionary ability to approve a $25,000 limit before going to the board, but $50,000 is a lot of money, and I question whether or not that we should do this as a board to allow LaRue to spend $50,000 on any change order without board approval.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to ask Blake how you guys work over at the Truckee Agency, and I know at Squaw Valley we have a $25,000 limit, and it works well. Granted, the projects that we have in Olympic Valley aren't the magnitude that we have here at the agency, but once again, $50,000 is a lot of go, and
Not anymore.
well, I just want to know how the rest of the board feels in regards to this change.
Well, I would ask LaRue, how does that limit your ability, or will that delay projects?
We haven't had encounters where it could delay a project because we've been able to get them in there, but it could occur. And I have total confidence in our staff, engineering department. They do a great job, construction managers, that when they're making a recommendation for a change order, it's been vetted and it's been processed and made sure that it's appropriate. So I have confidence what is provided to me and recommended that we have a change order. I trust that it's correct. So to me, it's just more of a question of how much of a risk do you want to postpone a construction schedule? Because every change order we brought to the board, I believe, has been approved. So all we're really doing is just accumulating time is what's happening. Yeah. And we've been very fortunate where it hasn't been a big issue. But I've had projects in my past experience where you're not issuing a field order and the project is halted, quite frankly. And now you're accumulating fees for vehicles, equipment, staff. We've been very fortunate here. That's why I stated when we started, this hasn't occurred very much, but it can occur. And you're right, $50,000 doesn't go very far on some of our projects. And again, and we're okay keeping the $25,000. We have a resolution in place. I'm just saying, if we're going to have this discussion, this is something we may want to reconsider and allow more authority.
I guess, the 50,000 is fine. I mean, 20% is probably
I'm
really
looking
the
more
governing
at
thing. We're talking about projects that are $1 million.
Yeah.
20% is 200,000. I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, typically, you guys, for a construction project, you negotiate a price, you bring it to the board for acceptance, typically we'll add some contingency to that I think is smart, because you want to be able to accommodate these. And so I would say, I don't know whether we, the 20%, or we pick a contingency that we give the GM authority to work within, and as soon as you start to exceed that contingency, maybe you need to come back to the board,
So,
I trust staff. I think we give you, to me that sounds better. I don't, 50,000 seems pretty small, and I wouldn't want to hold a project up or put, you or your staff in an awkward position of approving things, even though you have to, because that 50,000 is going to become 100,000 if you have to delay them a month and keep equipment on site because you haven't gotten board approval or having special board meetings to do that. I want to keep things moving smoothly.
So I'll offer a follow-up to Dale's question, and then I'll come over to you, Wayne. So you asked Blake.
Well, I was just asking the rest of the board, how they feel about, $50,000 to me is a lot of money. And in the scope of the projects that we have here at TTSA, it's not. But having a project held up for a month, I don't think that's really a reality, is it, LaRue? I mean, we have a board meeting every month. I mean, if somebody comes in with a change order the day after we have a board meeting, I can see the possibility of that kind of scenario happen. But to me, it seems like it would be very rare. But I just want to know how the rest of the board feels about giving LaRue the discretionary to spend $50,000 without board approval.
Right. So let me
Whether
come back.
it be a change order or anything else.
Right. So let me come back to the question you asked Blake in terms of how TSD handles its contracting practices. And I'll offer my employer, the town of Truckee, how they handle these kinds of things. So it's typically road projects. You typically have more unknowns with road projects because it's a lot of underground work that it's fast moving, and it can also, if you stop it, you've got issues in a number of different directions. You've got public inconvenience and whatnot. So anyway, the way it works there is we'll hire a contractor. They'll give us a bid. The board will approve a percentage contingency that the general manager has authorization to spend up to. So if it's a $200,000 contract and it's a 10% contingency, in that case it would be $20,000. If it's a $2 million contract and a 10% contingency, then it would be $200,000. But it's recognizing the magnitude of work and the higher likelihood that a higher contingency may be needed. So anyway, that's how they do it. It is with board approval, because ultimately the board says we're okay hiring the contractor and we're okay with the staff spending up to X dollars out of the contingency budget. And then what will happen at the end of the project is there will be a report back to the board saying we hired the contract for X dollars, we had the following 5 change orders that were for the following purposes at the following costs. So the board still has oversight, and there's still board approval that happens. It's just that they delegate the details, to the staff to make sure things can go forward. So that doesn't mean that that's the best model for TTSA. That's just the model that the town happens to use. Lane, you had some comments.
I didn't see a problem with the 50,000. I had a problem with the 20%. And we build in contingencies into these contracts anyway. and then it becomes a function of what we've allocated for our budget for that project. If it becomes larger issues than that, the full board should hear about it anyway. But well, like you said, I mean, a lot of our projects are a million plus, and you know, I mean, that's $200,000. That's an impact on our budget. I don't think 50,000 is, as opposed to, you know, I think the board should be concerned about it, knowing that we have built-in contingencies already, and if those aren't adequate, then we should address it. So I can go forward with the 50,000. That's not a problem. But the 20%, I wouldn't be comfortable with.
Okay.
I guess I would say the smoothest way to work would be when you bring construction projects, the manager brings a construction project, depending on the unknowns that are in there, you guys have to pick a percentage. Some projects are really clear. You know, I think the pipeline lining project, or not lining, but the T-Ving project, unlikely to have a lot of contingency costs. But when you're digging by the river or something like that, and you don't know all the conditions, you bring it in. So I'd love to see that addressed on a project-by-project basis. You make a recommendation to award with this amount of contingency. We discuss it, we approve it, and then you've got that amount to work with. If you exceed that, you know, you got to come back to us. But I think it really is a project-by-project basis, and you know that, and then you're working within something that we define when we approve acceptance of that project. Would be the best mechanism, I think. And in some cases, if it's like this Headworks project that was $2 million, and there's digging, and maybe you don't know all the underlying conditions, and there's still some, you know, optimization that may happen. You know, it could be a 15% or something contingency that could be, you know, $300,000. We would discuss that at the board at the acceptance, and you guys would have to give us your rationale for that not to exceed amount above and beyond that.
Couldn't we do it both ways? That there's a standing 25,000 or 50,000 contingency, and then on projects individually that are going to go high, then we put another number on it. So we're doing it both ways at 20% or 10% on a bigger project, and
There's probably a way to do that. So I just want to come back to make sure we're on track with the agenda item. So I think the agenda item, I think this contingency topic was one piece of it. I think there were a couple other pieces which were, and we can come back to that, but do we want to get progress payment reports and have to approve them in each agenda? Do we want to have to approve change orders in each agenda? I think what I heard from the board is we may want to update our change order policy, although there's different opinions on exactly how to do that. On the progress payment question, do other board members want to continue to have staff put together staff reports to us so that we authorize progress payments, or are you okay with the staff taking care of that?
I'm okay with the staff because we've already approved the project. As long, you know, there's no changes. I mean, why? You know, we've done the work as far as approving the project.
Right.
And when you get the change orders, that's the issue.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree with that.
Others, Dale?
Well, I'm just a little bit concerned about the 20%. Just like Lane was saying, when you're talking about a $2 million project, 20% could be a large chunk of change. I think that can we discuss a not to exceed figure of non-board approval spending?
Yes. So I think just to make sure I'm tracking, I think there's kind of three components to this, right? Does the board want to continue to approve progress payments? Does the board want to continue to approve all change orders? And do we want to consider updating our change order policy? Is there anything I'm missing, LaRue?
You guys are approving all change orders, just those that exceed the 25,000 that don't meet the criteria. So the other ones that don't affect the schedule or under 25,000, I do approve those because I have that authority.
Right.
So what we're looking is potentially amending that. And based off the feedback, what we've been doing is whenever there's a construction project, we're awarding it. We're actually awarding it for the bid amount.
Right.
So there's not very rarely we had a contingency in there. That's what the 10%. It's printed as 20, but I'm used to 10%. So I apologize for that misprint. But we could do is amend it to $50,000 in excess of what's approved by the board for these projects. Right. Is what the new resolution could say. That'll satisfy $50,000 criteria, and then we could bring back when we're approving projects from the bids, add appropriate contingencies as we feel at that time. Then we're kind of getting both options.
Right. So modifying our change order policy, we've had some good discussion on that. That wouldn't be an action we would necessarily take today. That's something that staff would bring back to us based on direction we provide. So let's stick a pin in that and come back to it because we've got different opinions on it. I haven't heard from other board members that continuing the practice of having the board approve progress payments is something that we need.
So I'll provide feedback. I don't get a lot of value out of those items in the agenda. As far as the agenda and the board, what we're trying to do is, I think, discussion of the content and organization of the board packets, which relates to how we conduct our business here. I look at the Fund 6 and 10, or I forget which one, no, it's 2 and 6, that are the capital projects. So they're not maybe up to date with the progress payments, but I look at those to see how we're progressing with regards to our capital projects. I'd be much more interested in rather seeing a progress payment report, but to have perhaps during staff report, more detail in terms of what's progressing with these capital projects. I think that would be of greater value to me as a board member than that table. And I don't know that the table creates any additional work for staff. That's probably something that's approved anyway. But my preference would be, I don't need to see the progress for payment. I'd rather I get it out of the fund reports and then, but I would like to see perhaps a little more multimedia use and updates on what's happening on the physical facility with these capital projects.
Okay.
I agree.
As we get in their staff reports, letting us know where those projects are with pictures and with the, we're already getting that.
Right.
The progress payment, I don't think it's necessary.
So you don't need it, Dale?
I'm okay.
You're okay with that? Okay. So, were there? Go ahead, Blake.
I don't want to jump ahead. I think maybe did we have a pin in that one also as far as the direction you wanted to go? Because I was just going to bring up something else different regarding.
Yeah, so I think the board packets. So I think the consensus I heard from the board is that we no longer need to see the detailed progress payment staff reports in the board packet. And if you want to go, Blake.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say I find the board packets to be really good. I think you put together good, actionable items. So in general, I'd say that the board packets are good. I'm glad we're doing a finance committee meeting because I sometimes, I offline often inquire about some of the consent items and I don't want to hold the board meetings up, and so now maybe we'll have a mechanism for that. I wondered whether or not, we've formed a finance committee. Is there going to be, how is that finance committee going to report back to the board as a whole? Is there going to be I've seen other agencies who have, report from those standing committees. TSD, we've got a finance committee, but they don't report back. They just, typically it's those two people that make the motion and the second for the finance approval of the warrants. And they're leaned on maybe to provide, they've got more background to provide input on other financial matters, but I'm wondering whether, now that we're finding a finance committee, how we envision, Lane and I's role when we come back to a general meeting, and how that might impact the board packet or more so the agenda.
Right.
I don't think there's going to be anything in the packet itself.
Right. Dave, looked like you had something
Yeah,
to say.
at Alpine, that's how we view it. We do get a report with our packet. It may arrive on the table when we arrive, so we don't have a chance to look at it ahead of time, but that's how we do it at Alpine, is it is part of the packet that we get a report from the Finance Committee, from all of our standing committees.
Got it. So at the Tahoe City PUD, we have three committees: Finance Committee, a Sewer and Water Committee, and a Parks and Rec Committee. We don't get reports from each committee. What we'll get are the meeting minutes from the committee meeting, and then any items within, let's say, like a PERS related item that would go to the Finance Committee. What we would get is a recommendation, typically on an action item from the Finance Committee. So if the Finance Committee is recommending that we pay off unfunded accrued liability, then that would be a recommendation coming to the full board from the
Right.
Finance Committee.
Right. Same thing.
That's how it's working
Yeah,
out.
that's the way we do it.
Okay, and you do the
Yeah.
same thing as
Well,
well.
what we usually do is the Finance Committee makes a report on the financial consent agenda items, and if there's any large expenditures that are out of the ordinary, they bring it to the board's attention, and if any of the board members have any questions on that spending, they have the opportunity to ask questions. But the Finance Committee generally reports on any expenditures that are over and above normal expenditures, like the unfunded liability or any other payments that would pop out at somebody reviewing the financial consent agenda items. The board has an opportunity to ask questions.
Got it. Does that help, Blake and Lane, in terms of?
I guess I'm still not clear. So is there going to be an agenda item report from Finance Committee, or not? We're just there to be able to provide
Recommendations.
Yeah,
recommendations.
additional
Okay.
information that we have, that
Okay.
we've gone over. I think that's the way to do it.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So for clarification, there's no regular agenda item. We would maintain the current consent agenda items of financial statements and general fund warrants in the consent agenda. And that's where, if there's going to be any feedback or recommendations from the committee, that's where it'll occur.
Right.
So when we address the consent agenda items, is there any comments from the board of directors of the committee? That's when that would occur.
That's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear.
Right. Okay, and then kind of back, it sounds like we're good with not having to approve progress payments. And then I think I was hearing some interest by the board to have a future agenda item to talk about our change order policy. What I heard was different opinions as to what that should be. I think I heard Dale saying 25,000 is
Well,
his comfort level.
25,000 is my comfort level, but in view of the scope of work that we have here at the agency, $25,000 isn't a lot of money. 50,000 is I think good, but the 20% can be a significant amount of dough, and when you start talking those kind of numbers, I like to see that the board's made aware of that additional spending and that we should approve it.
So you're saying take off the percentage, just go up to 50, and then, we're looking at a 30-day period during something would happen in between, then the board would take it up at that time.
Now, by all means, I don't want to ever see failure to approve a change order, hold up a project. However, when we're talking, $100,000 or $75,000, I think that the board ought to be aware of that additional spending, and that,
The general manager can always call a special meeting.
Yeah, if it was that important, that critical, we'd do a special.
Exactly.
Yeah.
as needed.
If time is of the essence there.
So-
If you just do the 50,000 and not do the percentage, and then, if something goes beyond that, you call a special meeting to take it up at that time, if time's of the essence.
So I have a suggestion now that we have a newly formed finance committee, and we have
The
multiple.
finance committee to form.
And we have multiple opinions of the board on this, because I quite frankly am comfortable with staff having more authority as long as we approve it.
That's it.
And they're responsible in the end anyway,
Right.
no matter what happens.
And I have all the confidence in the people analyzing what's going on with the projects. However, like I say, I think that it's the responsibility of the board to make sure that we have control over what's going on as far as for spending. And when you talk about the possibility of having $100,000 additional spending in a change order, I think the board ought to be aware of it. And I think that we ought to approve it without the possibility of holding up the project.
Except that possibility exists. So if you have a situation on a larger, complex project where something comes up and it's beyond the expenditure authority that we've given staff, they've got a decision to make at that point of, do they approve it anyway and hope that we go along with it, recognizing that they're kind of putting themselves out there? Do they run through a fire drill of calling a special board meeting and the effort that comes along with that? Or do they stop the project, which sometimes can make projects cost more money and take longer? That's the reason that I'm comfortable with when we as a board approve a project, and so we award a bid, let's say it's $1.5 million project, and that staff comes to us and says, hey, this is a pretty straightforward project, it's well quantified, there isn't much change order risk. We think on this one, 5% contingency is all we need because of these factors. Versus another project that maybe has a bunch of underground work associated with it, a lot more unknowns, where staff says, hey, there's a lot of unknowns on this project, it's going to be fast moving. We are requesting a 10% contingency on this so that we as the board still are controlling the maximum spending, but we're doing it on a project by project basis based on the dynamics and the kind of the details of that project. But then it's like a total amount that we approve when we award the bid, and then staff has that authority. If cumulatively they go beyond that, they got to check back with us. And then the other place I think we can get the oversight is that they also need to report back to us as they're approving change orders, so that we know that it's been done, so we can still see it happening. It's just we're reducing the likelihood that we either hold up a project or that we put staff in a position of having to run a fire drill to get a special board meeting. So that's, I think we're all saying variations on the same thing.
Right. And how often would you suppose that would come up, that you would need to have a special board meeting? Once a year?
I haven't had any since I've been here.
Right.
But we haven't had, we've had smaller projects, to be fair. We're starting to get into bigger projects now, bigger costs. And I think it's reasonable to if I'm reading this right, maybe increase it 25 to 50, and then when we award projects, put in the contingency there. So so an option is to come back, amend the resolution, bring it to 50,000, keeping the same criteria as listed in the staff report, and then just reflect and go 50,000 in excess of the approved amount, and then we just deal with that, whether it be 0% contingency, 5, 10 per contract. I think that would be the best solution here. We don't need to have a special meeting. I mean, we can actually get the direction now and bring a resolution next month.
Right.
Or we can just have I think you're going to having the finance committee address that and come with a recommendation.
That's
I think the only time we took that up, Dave, was when we were doing the plant expansion. It was one issue.
Well, we had some issues with the 81 to 83 pipeline remodel down there with the guy that was on the river that was asking us for more money and badgering LaRue for more money, and LaRue, it was out of his control, and he'd have to come to the board, and I think that's well warranted. And that was just that was not like the BNR project. That was a project that, clear cut and dry. It should have been easy digging and all that kind of stuff, but there was some other things that was happening during the project that really needed some board scrutiny and board approval. And I think that those are the kind of things
Right.
that I'm concerned about. And it's
Right. But
So-
that was the land negotiation, right? That wasn't part of the construction contract.
well, that's right, but it was all part of the project.
Right.
And so if we go by a project basis, I just want to make sure that we manage the public's money in a fiduciary manner, and that we do our job.
Yep. So I guess a question for the board, we've had some good dialogue here. It sounds like there's some interest in revisiting the change order policy. What I'd like to suggest is if staff could take what you've heard, come up with a draft updated change order policy, review that with the finance committee, see if there's consensus with the finance committee to make a recommendation to the full board or not. And if so, great. And if not, then we can just hash it out at the full board.
All right.
You guys good with that?
Sure. Yeah.
That'll work.
That'll work? Okay. Look at that.
Oh, boy.
What's that?
Financial experts here.
Yeah.
Just got on the committee and already they got a job.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
The third discussion point was the level of detail in the packets.
Yeah.
Because again, they can be quite big. So, like I said, we put them wherever I think is appropriate.
This is perfect. This is perfect.
So there's a couple things I think we can reduce. Like whenever we have approvals for projects to go out to bid, I've asked to include the plans because I think that gives a good demonstration of what the project is. I like those. Does the board want to continue seeing that? See, I think they're valuable. So we're okay maintaining that, right? So going through the detail here.
So on that though, I mean, you've got kind of plan sets, then you've got plan sets, right?
Yeah.
The specs. Don't need to include the specs.
Yeah.
No, I keep the specs out. I think that's too much detail.
Right. I mean, for me, plan sheets that have the basic schematics
Okay.
of a project is all that I need. I don't necessarily need all the
Detail.
The
Miscellaneous
detail.
details. Okay.
Yeah, I need enough information to understand what the project is. I don't necessarily care about the details of the pump or the whatever all the widgets are that are going into it. That's just me. I don't know about other board members.
No, I concur. Leave it to your discretion to.
Okay. All right, so just to revisit the format we have now, we'll still maintain a consent agenda item. The pay estimates, progress pay estimates, as you can see on this agenda, items 3 and 4 will now be rolled into the general fund warrants, right? There will be an opportunity for the finance committee to provide any recommendations there. The regular agenda items we will keep as is. So the plans for when it comes to projects, we'll bring some plans regarding the amount of sheets and the level of detail. We'll leave it up to us, the staff, to decide. When it comes to purchases where we have an authority to bypass bidding. If we go to a contracted source or the government's entity, we've been providing documentation showing that. And this is more for validation for you guys to let you know that we've gone through the necessary steps. Do you guys need to continue seeing that documentation? We haven't done it in a while, but that could accumulate to 10, 12 pages as well.
Yeah.
So if you guys are okay with that, we can amend that.
I mean, my expectation is that we're complying with our purchasing policies and that you're staying within your purchasing authority.
Okay.
As long as that's happening, I don't necessarily need to see documentation of that in our board packet.
Yeah, it was more for transparency, but yeah, I agree. It's just confirmation, and we will stay with.
I mean, those records need to exist in our
correct
in our purchasing files.
Right.
Yeah.
Other than that, depending on what the topic is, we just bring the typical document. So if we're having a resolution, of course, we're attaching the resolution, so we're not really going to change those things. So Is there anything else you guys think that may be too much information?
Well, there was one issue here, a few months ago where we had a board packet that was like the LA phone book, and basically what it was all the APNs for all the parcels and what they're paying and all of that stuff. And remember, Rochelle, I talked to you about that, and it was just a lot of paper and a lot of content in a board review package that, quite frankly, I didn't even look at because it was just, I mean, I could have spent days going through everybody's APN and all of that stuff. Is that necessary at that time? I remember that we talked about it, Rochelle, and you had some comment that it was public disclosure or something like that. Could you help me out again with that?
Sure, Dick might be able to help with that too. It's part of the report that we have to provide. We have to provide for the county, and we put the report online, and for each county that we submit the information for, that we are providing there, and then this is part of Crystal's reporting, so I don't know if she wants to comment on that, but for each county that we're reporting the taxes that we are going to submit, and for those that we're submitting to taxes, we are reporting each APN and how much is being submitted. So we are putting that in advance, and so there are those that are going to be delinquent and those that are the regular tax roll. So we put those on.
And if I may, that was at my direction to include those in the packets. And the reason I do that is because now we have a complete packet for the public to review. I've always thought it occurs once a year. It is a lot of pages, I will agree with you. But now we have the documentation that if there's any question on whether the board approved, if their parcel was ever part of that approval, that would resolve that. So it's not a frequent monthly occurrence, it's once a year.
Yeah.
But I do more of a guarantee to make sure that if there's any questions, we have something to go back to reference.
Okay.
So I would still like to keep that, but if you'd like not
Okay,
to.
I just, I was just hoping that you didn't expect the board to sit back and go through all that.
No, sir.
I mean, it was just a.
Let's have to make sure you paid.
I pay a lot.
Dave, did you have a comment? No. You didn't, okay. Okay, did you get the direction you needed out of this, Lou?
I do, and I'll proceed with the board packets, and anytime the board feels that we need to omit or add additional items, feel free to just inform us at that time.
Okay. And just, you guys are okay reviewing a updated change order policy with staff? And
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any rush
come back
on
with a
that coming
recommendation.
back, whether it's a month or 2 months or 3 months. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is discussion of in-person board meetings.
Thank you. After our September 15th board meeting, the California State Legislators approved Assembly Bill 361. And essentially what that does is it allows us to hold our public meetings differently. So what I'll do is I'll recap what the Brown Act says now and what AB 361 allows. And then the idea is to get some direction from the board and see how we'd like to proceed. So currently, the Brown Act allows us to meet by teleconference to include that each teleconference location is identified in the regular agenda notice. The meeting notice and agenda must be posted at each teleconference location. Each teleconference site must be accessible to the public and provide an opportunity for the public to make comments to hear the meeting at each site. And at least a quorum of the members must participate from locations within the boundaries of the agency's territory. We've done that in the past whenever people have gone to, say, Florida, they were called in. So that's what the Brown Act is requiring right now. With the passing of AB 361, they've allowed us to amend that to have a modified teleconference procedure, which now says members of the local agency can participate from any location. There is no requirement that each teleconference location be accessible to the public or provide an opportunity for members to make in-person public comment. The notice of the agenda does not need to identify for each site where the local agency board members will be teleconferencing from. And in order to implement AB 361, a couple things have to occur. So what that really means is we can now have televised, going back to Zoom meetings essentially. To implement AB 361, a couple things have to occur. There has to be a declared state of emergency, which the California legislators have done because of COVID. And then our board needs to determine when the state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing, or determine if we were to meet in public, would it present imminent risk to health or safety of attendees. And then based on the direction, there's other criteria we have to have on our agenda to authorize AB 361, renew it, or reauthorize it, depending on a 30-day count between board meetings. So in summary, what it is we could maintain our in-person meetings, go to meetings via teleconference, full teleconference in accordance with AB 361, with steps that we have to do, or we could do a hybrid option, which is very difficult to implement at this time because we just don't have the AV technology, or at least I haven't been able to figure out how that's going to occur. So if I've missed anything on that?
No, it's a fair summary of the room.
Okay. And the recommendation that management has is that we continue with in-person meetings, simply because I feel that even though the state has declared it as an emergency, that's met the first criteria. There is no social distancing requirement right now with 6 feet. We're maintaining masks. So I don't know if that imminent danger is there, but that's a decision that the board will have to decide if they feel that that's appropriate.
Okay, so staff's recommendation is we continue with the in-person meetings, which would mean, so for instance, if our friend Dale is out of town, we would still have an in-person meeting. We would notice the fact that Dale is participating remotely.
Correct.
And basically go through the same process that we did a couple of years ago. Same for any one of us.
Correct.
So that's what the staff recommendation is.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, questions or comments?
So with AB 361, is it, you have to be proactive or is it reactive? I mean, by adopting 361, which would allow the use of the kind of remote meeting, virtual meeting, does that, this 30-day period, is that something that, if we adopted it today, that gives us the ability next meeting to have it? Or, it's such a dynamic world out there, especially with this COVID. One day everything, the trends are going down. The next day, the trends are going up.
You could do it as a first agenda item, we advise. The bill is very poorly written, but the way my office construes it and applies it is if you decide you want to have a 100% virtual meeting, you may do so. And as agenda item 1, you make the determination, we think there's an imminent, on Zoom, right? We, the board, find that there's an imminent risk to meeting in person, therefore we're going to meet virtually at this meeting and moving forward. If that agenda item 1 passes, then you move forward with the rest of the agenda. If the board doesn't approve that first agenda item, then the meeting's over. Right?
But that's for a 30-day period, correct?
And then that's good for a 30-day
And so
period,
you
and
end
then
up
every
doing it
meeting
every meeting
moving forward,
first
you need to make some findings to renew that, and you can continue doing that until 2024 or until the governor declares an end to the emergency, whichever comes first.
Okay.
So, I guess, thank you for the clarification on that. It is confusing.
Yes.
So is there an imminent health risk? That's somewhat subjective. I would say I'm comfortable with continuing to have it in-person meetings, so long as none of the board or your staff or the public expresses a public health concern over that. Whether there's a health concern or I don't know whether you, and I would assume that you would have shared this with us, if there was staff that was, uncomfortable with these meetings and all that, we'd want to know about that,
I haven't received any reports from staff that they're uncomfortable with holding me.
And the only other reason, and this is a condition at TSD, is we're tending to go virtual because I've got board members that really don't want to be putting these over their face for 2 to 3 hours, and so they prefer virtual. And you can construe that as a health concern on their part. And so long as, I think we're good. If matters changed, I imagine, obviously you need to notice a virtual meeting a week before the actual meeting to put it out in the agenda and give the Zoom link. So if, a week before the meeting when you're preparing the agenda, as things continue as they are, I think we continue to have the meetings just like we're doing now, fine. If, for whatever reason, staff concerns, public health, I don't know, the dang thing skyrockets again and there's a surge in Truckee, new variant, reach out to us, obviously, and then, we would go virtual and agendize it, number one.
It's a 30-day notice that you've got to give, correct?
No,
No.
it's just the regular
Okay.
3-day agenda posting
All right.
rule.
But, I guess, to summarize, I'm comfortable with not adopting that resolution tonight and, leaving it in, I would reach out to you,
Right.
I think, in addition to you reaching out to us, if we had concerns as we near the next meeting, if there was a concern about the way we're having these meetings.
Dale?
I have no comment.
You
I
good?
think I'm leaving it up to staff to do what's easiest for them, and as long as we're compliant with the law, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with this.
In person?
The way we're going right now, and
Okay.
if the room fills up and we are wanting to change the deal, I'm comfortable with that too, and go back
Okay.
to
Okay.
online.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. I had a detailed question because this actually came up. So, let's say I, as a board member, start to have symptoms of cold, COVID, whatever it might be. I'm like, oh shit, I shouldn't come to the meeting today, right? That's used to be you had a cold, you showed up to work, and you worked through it. Anymore, that's a big no-no. So I guess the question there, if there's like a last minute kind of a thing, where one of us, a key staff member, is like, oh, shit, I shouldn't come to the meeting, but I feel I could participate remotely. Is there a way to accommodate that, or not? Kind of last minute.
Yeah, it
Well,
outlined.
and you talk about one person.
I'm talking about one person.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the teleconference.
Not easily, if it's very much last minute, meaning you don't have the 3-day notice to let staff know that, hey, I'm going to be participating from my home, please put my home address.
Okay, so you just got to skip the meeting.
You just got to skip the meeting, or what some directors have done, I've seen, is I've had directors call in because they want to listen, they want to participate, but they're not.
They can't vote.
They can't vote, and they're not part of the quorum. But you can also do that informally. And
How about with a hybrid meeting, because that's what we're doing in Alpine, and one of the board members, her children tested, one of her kids tested positive, so she wouldn't come to the meeting, and she was participating in the.
And again, that's okay, but then we need to get it on. We need to get that posted on the agenda ahead of time if you want to participate from that location. And it's 361 really doesn't allow this sort of
Kind of a last minute change.
last minute
Okay.
change on because then the full.
Yeah, because
And
we're
again,
already.
it's frustrating because the doggone thing is so poorly written, because what you're proposing makes total practical sense, that the board ought to be able to make a finding that, Director Smith today is sick, so she's going to participate virtually, and make that determination, and
Right.
you move forward, but the law is really not that flexible.
Okay. Okay.
I've had COVID twice and participated during the meeting, so in the past.
Remotely.
Remotely,
Right.
yeah. So,
Not
yeah.
clarifying.
No, we were all remote back then. It
Okay.
worked.
So I think what I heard is consensus from the board for now, continuing with in-person meetings. And if circumstances change going forward, we could revisit that and adjust.
Good.
Is that fair? Okay.
And the only last pitch I'll make is for those of you that have anything to do with League of California Cities or CASA or CSDA, this thing really needs a legislative fix, and I hope the Brown Act's not done. It's very frustrating because in the bills that happened last year, the state made it easier for state agency boards to meet virtually moving forward because it's worked so well and the state agency boards love it. But local agency boards, it's just this very harsh, unrealistic stuff. So it demands a legislative fix. So hopefully the discussion's not over.
Okay. All right, next on our agenda, management team report and department reports. Who'd like to start?
I'll go first.
Michael.
Good morning, Board of Directors, President Wilkins. The operations report for the month of October, or actually September. All plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Overall, the plant performed well through the month. We have selected recruitment candidates and have provided a conditional offer of employment. Well 31 samples read 6.6 for the month, and we continue to add the caustic solution to the effluent and maintain a 7.0 pH set point. Operations work orders, we completed 3 and we have 4 pending. For the laboratory, staff performed necessary laboratory testing per WDR requirements and operational needs for the month. The international accreditation services, which was the third-party assessment services that we had come in, completed the laboratory assessment, and the initial assessment report was good. And based on that, staff have commenced addressing the findings that have come through, the initial findings, and staff also continue to train the remaining operators for the weekend testing, and we'll be completing the DOCs soon. Laboratory corrective action items was 1 completed and 1 pending for the month. And that's all I have for the operations report. Any questions?
Very good. On that international accreditation services, I mean, who was the group that did that?
Jason, you want to speak to it? Our laboratory director, I'll have Jason speak to the, since he worked directly with the third-party assessor.
Yeah.
So what was the question? I'm sorry.
Who was the third-party group that did the international accreditation service?
So they're actually a company.
That is the company. Okay,
Yeah,
that
so
is the company.
Yeah, what happened is the state gave, I think it's 5 companies the
Okay.
right to do third-party assessments for California ELAP in the state.
Okay.
And we had a list. I put in offers, got bids.
Okay.
They were a good bid.
So this is giving you a list of ELAP requirements and how we're meeting them.
Correct.
And you've since they've been here, you've received a report back from them.
We have not received the report yet. He was kind enough to give us a draft.
Okay.
He had to be kind of careful committing 100% to it because he has to get buy-off from the state on that report.
Okay.
But he did kind of indicate that if it was going to be different, it was going to have fewer findings, not more.
Okay.
Effectively, the state might disagree with some of his findings, but that is kind of rare.
Okay. I'm just saying. I mean, when you get the report back, you'll notify us of the findings. Correct?
Oh yeah. I already know what the findings are going to be. They were relatively minor for the most part, thankfully.
Okay.
A couple of modifications to the quality assurance manual, some business-related stuff like document retention policy. They wanted that in our QAM, so that kind of stuff.
So we're in the process of meeting all is it the 2023 ELAP? Is that the year that we have to meet?
So the order is going to be, this one that I've just done is for my 2022 recertification.
Okay.
We do not have to recertify again until 2024.
Okay.
But in those intervening 24 months, I need to provide the state with a assessment that meets the TNI requirements.
Okay.
So that's actually something I'm going to be working on next year. I'm going to try and get a little bit of a head start on it.
Okay.
I'm going to try before the end of 2022 to meet TNI.
Okay. And you'll make a list of those TNI requirements and do a little report for the board.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And see which one give us a checklist of which ones we've accomplished and which ones we are working on.
Yeah, effectively the way I'm going to go about it, the agency that created the standard makes a lot of resources available for implementing it. I've got all those resources, so it's very checklistized. So it shouldn't be a problem kind of giving you an assessment of percent completion and project, progress.
Okay, but nothing new that was brought up that you weren't made aware of?
No.
Okay.
No,
With regards to that?
like I said, there was a couple of documentation type things that came up during the assessment, and traceability.
Okay.
So was something that we used for something written, on the sheet, or was it implied that we used it? They said, well, it's fine, you can say it was implied, but we want it written, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, nothing as far as the methods are concerned, as far as the analytical quality. He did make a comment that he felt that we had very good staff, that we had a very good relationship with our primary client,
Yeah.
and that he said that he goes into labs a lot of times and he's immediately concerned with data quality, and that was not a concern he had here. He was pretty happy with our eagerness to jump into the TNI pool.
Yeah.
He indicated that they're still seeing a lot of resistance from the smaller laboratories in the state to the TNI. And he was very happy with our perspectives of trying to kind of get on that a little bit early.
Okay.
So, yeah, overall, pretty positive experience.
Great. That's what we'd like to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would like to commend staff that were here that day that participated with the third-party assessment, and Jason, the laboratory director, did a really good job. So, and we're moving forward with becoming TNI compliant.
It's good to hear that they're compliant, that we are moving at a quick pattern for those TNI requirements, and that we're assuring the public that everything's being done in the lab that's being done necessarily to meet the wastewater discharge requirements. And there's no questions that have been raised, so that's good.
Okay, thanks. Blake?
Mike, I had a couple questions. One, your report indicates that you've got conditional offers of employment. One, how many folks? And two, I think the recruitment went anywhere from like laborer up to operator. It was the full spectrum. I'm wondering what level folks are coming in at.
Yeah, so right now we have 2 conditional offers out for 2 staff members, and they are both at the OIT level.
Which is entry level, or is that a step above entry?
No, that would be entry level.
Okay, so you're going to be, so they're just starting out
Yes.
In the field. Okay, gotcha. Second question I had was, are we looking at, this might go back to you, LaRue, a little bit also, and Jason, you might touch on it. I know we've got our WDR. Is the WDR being modified, or the permit with Wahonton, and what level of interaction are we having with them in the modified or changed permit we have with Wahonton?
So my understanding of what Wahonton is doing is they are looking at the WDR, and they're going to take into all considerations of whether it needs to remain as a WDR, whether it becomes an NPDES based on our discharge out to the groundwater aquifer. They're looking at all that right now, but it's very preliminary.
Okay.
And they've got a lot on their plate, but they are moving forward with, if it does stay WDR, also revising, since it has been since 2002 that our WDR has been revised, and that we've been assured that we'd be part of that process to come up with a product that was reasonable and protected the environment and the waterways.
They have not set a timeline for when the revised permit would be
No,
issued?
there's no timeline as of now.
Thanks.
Good. Any other questions for Mike? Seeing none, I think, Richard, I think you're up next.
Good morning, President Wilkins, Board of Directors. So maintenance for September, we continue to assist on various items of the Headworks project. We're currently wrapping up our assistance on the plant coating project. We're putting the secondary and the stripper back together. We've been working on the plant security camera project and are nearing wrapping that up finally after some challenges with the supply chain on some equipment as well as the COVID-related employee supply chain. We're working heavy on Lucity with the addition of Saraja. She's been making great strides in data input and bringing the system online. We hope to have some more positive feedback to present the next board meeting on that, but it's going really well. We've completed our assistance with engineering on the TRI digital scanning, And we also kicked off our SCADA IT master plan with Jacobs, and that went well and is well on its way. As far as some routine activities, we did have another incident of graffiti on the boulder at Georgia and Butterfield that we took care of, and we did file a police report with Truckee PD. We're continuing the shop reorganization and IT office relocation as fill-in work. Had several staff attend the CWD Safety Day, which was a nice return to having the staff be able to meet with their counterparts from other agencies in person. Want to call out staff for some fabrication. Our main mechanical fabricator is out on vacation, and one of our E&I staff stepped in because they had some experience. So it was nice to see that crossover in trades. We've completed the biannual TRI flow meter calibration that was due, and that was done a month early. And then kind of double dipped here with the SCADA IT master plan. As far as work orders go, we're holding pretty steady with the uptick in mechanical, and that's just because of the impact of some of the projects. With those wrapping up, we'll be able to probably lower that backlog down a little bit. Any questions or comments?
Questions? Blake?
I'm just curious, when you did your flow meter calibration, whether there was much adjustment needed?
None of the sites required any adjustment.
Okay.
Everything was so everything was in full everything's reading accurately.
Correct.
Okay, and that's every 6 months we do that, correct?
That's correct.
With an outside consultant.
Correct, and then they engineer stamped it per our WDR.
Okay, great.
Okay. Other questions for Richard? Dale?
Richard, as far as for calibrating the in-house meters, what about the meters at Alpine and Squaw? How often are they checked and calibrated?
Every 6 months they're checked. Squaw being a mag meter, it doesn't get calibrated. Those are factory calibrated, but it does get checked and verified that the coil's good and that the readout to the local display, and then what's getting reported back via the telemetry radio is accurate.
Okay, so we get here at TTSA a readout on our flows as they go into the siphon? As they go into the siphon?
Correct.
Yeah. And we have it on a screen right there in the control room?
Correct.
Great. Any other questions for Richard? All right, seeing none. Jay?
Morning, directors. So in the month of September, engineering staff worked on the projects listed there. In general, all of our projects have wrapped up stage one, and the one is the Headworks project. October 15 has come and gone, which is always a sigh of relief, as sometimes there's surprise projects that contractors or owners call us late in the game. That didn't happen much this year, so we're thankful for that. Painting job went well. They're off-site. They have a little bit of demo to do, but everything's painted. And as Richard mentioned, we're in the process of rebuilding the structures that they were working on. Headworks is going well. We have one screen and compactor in operations. Been in operation for about 2 weeks now. We did have some startup, I'll call them startup hiccups that happen, and that's the normal routine as a new process is started. That you have to kind of work through some of the new issues. We did have one failure that the contractor is operated. It appears to be either a weld or a coupling failure, but the good thing is that our screen is a name brand in the industry, so we have a backing from really good companies, so good response. We are starting to work on our 2022 projects and getting those design developed. So within the next month or two, you should be starting to see that next round of construction drawings for next year. Are there any questions anybody has on any of the projects that are listed?
Board members, any questions for Jay?
I just had that one on, you have on 2022, roof repair project. I thought we already did all of our roof repairs.
Yeah, so there's, as time goes on, there's always additional areas that come up. And we've had a few areas on our radar screen, that we have on watch. And we did have those monies budgeted
anticipation that those areas were wearing down and they need to be dealt with. So it is what's foreseen, it is budgeted. What you'll notice after this next year, I think if you go to the CIP, it's then, I think, a few years after that we have a placeholder project for anything else might come up. So the point being is, to address your question, we have a lot of APDM roofing out there that has not been repaired and upgraded. Not that it's in need of upgrade or repair right now, but if you're under the impression that we've just replaced all of our EPDM roofing, that's not the case. I would say, we're over these last few projects, maybe we've replaced 20% of our coverage.
Okay, how, I mean, on the 2022 project, how is it going to affect operations?
Not much. So these are areas.
Not like the last one.
No, so in the last ones, if you recall, we had prioritized those areas because they were over critical facilities.
Correct.
These ones were of the, called third tier priorities, and that there's really not much damage it would cause, But that being said, is there would be some damage, not to the level that we were looking on the other ones.
Okay.
But that it is in need of repair.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Jay?
Real quick, this seems like every month, just the status of the sewer master plan.
Yep. So sewer master plan, we had one final. So up till recently, we had only seen bits and pieces of the sewer master plan. This last round was the first time that we'd seen the whole thing squished together. And because of that, there were some coordination items and fixes that needed to occur. So we sent them a last round of comments. They're currently addressing this. So I would hope that next month or December, we should be seeing the final product back.
Jay, and is this a 50-page, 100-page, 400-page? How big is this document going to be?
You ready for my answer? So I think it's between 800 and 900 pages.
Oh.
800 and 900.
Is there a summary version?
Get the stick guy.
Volume 1 is an executive summary.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And then I appreciate the pictures of the Headworks project. I guess I'd make a request, LaRue and Jay, maybe some video or something like that. It's hard from a static picture to really tell what's going on there, especially if they're doing some performance testing. If you get any video and you can share it with us, I think I'd be interested in seeing it. And I think the rest of the board would probably be, a little 10-second clip of these. This is an expensive project. What we've done out there, what the several $1 million are buying us, would be appreciated.
If I can just ask a question, I forgot to discuss this in the other agenda item, but when it comes to these graphs, when you want this interactive presentation with pictures and projects, do you guys want to see more graphs? Have that included in the interactive, less graphs? I'm referring to Michael Peake's report.
I like the graphs in the board packet, and I would say if there's any particular activities that are reflected in the graphs during Mike's presentation, for instance, the last month, we saw the impact, I think, of reduction in flows due to the fire. If you wanted to highlight that and bring that up and point that out to us, I think that'd be great. To utilize the multimedia, but not walk through each one of those if it's sort of business as usual, but only as there's something that's worth noting for our attention.
I'd like, I don't know whether it's Jay or Mike, but when we talk about, the impacts of COVID and the new people that have come in, that article in the Sarah Sun with the amount of new people coming into as full-time residents into Truckee, the numbers are quite high. What's the impact been to TTSA as far as the plant, and is that being addressed with the Carrillo report?
No, the master plan doesn't envision that type of
future flows. When we're going to look at plant expansion.
It does envision
how the last couple of years has impacted that. I mean, that's the question. When you read about the population increase, especially in Truckee, and then you have the amount of second homeowners used to be 80% of our inventory, and now they're probably full-time out of that. Probably got another 20% people of those, quote, 20% of those people are not full-time people in those second homes. Because the average, when we looked at it 3 or 4 years ago, the average stay in a second home was 6 weeks. Now it's accelerated with COVID as far as more people coming up and staying here. And how does that impact the plan?
Yeah, it wasn't ever part of their scope because before we started this work before COVID.
Correct.
Hit.
Yeah.
And that is a difficult thing to pin down because anecdotally what I'm hearing is, and I think what we've seen is that, during COVID, it seemed like people moved up here, full-time or where they thought to be full-time, from the Bay Area to work in tech and remotely. And what I'm hearing anecdotally around town and seeing it is that those same people are now being clawed back to the Bay Area because their employer is saying you either need to be back in person, or if you aren't back in person, you get X percent amount of pay cut, and that ends up driving them down the hill. Some of the realtors I've heard say is that we have an inventory, a flooded inventory of people that are trying to get their places on short-term rental because they're back in the Bay Area and they bought a new place up here. So this thing is very fluctuating.
Yeah.
So I would think that it'd be difficult for a consultant to really
Well,
argue with that.
flow data apparently, because okay, for one, 4th of July weekend up here with no fireworks and a huge amount, even with no fireworks, huge amount of people. Are our peaks becoming less of a peak, and we're coming more at a higher level of consistent flows because most of those second homeowners are in those homes now? I mean, these are questions with regards to population increase here, as far as how, as a board, we're going to look at when plan expansion should take, how we plan for the next plan expansion here.
Well, from a capacity standpoint, what we've heard from Corello is that by and large, we're good on capacity. The bulk of what you're going to read in the master plan is about condition assessment. The condition of our aging assets. We're nearing 45 years on a lot of our original facilities, and some of them are, or a lot of them are in need of repair with upgrade maintenance. So from a capacity standpoint, Michael, you can chime in here, but they've looked at the situation from the master plan and said that's not where your problem lies.
Okay.
You want to talk about today's capacity at all?
Yeah, I mean, again, I hear what Jay said. Is that I don't think we have any capacity limitations. It's really hard to quantify whether it's the flows are different because of, if you look back at, we've got a 3-year span here. Almost all those 3 years were impacted by, well, at least 2 of these years were impacted by COVID and part of another year. So it's really hard to say, is it, are there, I know that they've done studies and they say that there's more full-time people up, but because of the lack of visitation, because of other, like for this summer, for instance, all the smoke, it really did change how much in the fires really changed impact, and you can see that the flows were down significantly this late summer and fall compared to the 2 previous years. So there's just been so many things that have happened over the last few years. It's really hard to put a finger on why or how the full-time residents have impacted flows and loadings, but we are well below any of our criteria for the plant to meet those flows and loadings.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any other questions for Jay? Seeing none. Next is Crystal.
Good morning, Board of Directors. So I just have a couple things to report. Last week, we had our auditors in on-site for final field work. We're doing some more wrapping up off-site with them and should be wrapping up field work and their questions by the end of November. And then they'll work on putting the financials together. So that's what my staff was mostly working on this past month. Michelle Mackey, the county supervisor, attended a GFOA course. Their online courses are proving to be very beneficial. She had, and there was emphasis in treasury management, best practices and groundwork for payables and receivables, procedures in banking and procuring banking, and then internal controls and fraud. She brought back some of that training to the rest of us. Celeste, our billing and customer service, who is also doing our purchasing and procurement right now. She's working with the Ames team, with some of Richard's team, and they sent an update for the GIS database with current data, and they're still working on that currently. And that's really the update from what my team has been doing.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Any questions for Crystal? All right, seeing none, next would be General Manager's report.
Thank you. I'll just hit a couple of the big highlights. The rest is already written in here. One of the things I want to touch base on is that the laboratory is getting a new LIMS system, which is the Laboratory Information Management System. So we've been doing things historically in paper, so now we'll be getting a software program that will assist the laboratory tracking the data, equipment, and assist in becoming a management tool for them. So that's a positive there. Also, we're going to be changing over from a .net domain name to a .ca.gov. The report states it's going to occur at the beginning of 2022. Rest assured, there's going to be about a 3-month period there where we will maintain the old domain addresses, so everything will be forwarded to you. So if you're using your TTSA, your name at ttsa.net for that transition period for the 3 months after the beginning of the year, anybody that uses that email address, you'll still be receiving under the new email. Likewise with the website. They'll go to the .net website. It'll automatically go over to the .ca.gov website domain and inform them that there's been an address change. So that's one of the things we want to get there. Again, we've already touched on it, but our flow meter calibrations are completed. We have the report, so if there's any of your member districts that would like your copy of the report, please reach out to me and I'll make sure that it gets sent out to your districts. Wanted to address a couple of acknowledgments here. One is for Michael Peak and Greg O'Hare for the recent tour to North Tahoe PUD. Had a couple of their directors show up, as well as some of their staff. They did a great tour, very informative. I think they were very pleased with it. They found some new knowledge, so that's always good. I also want to acknowledge the whole entire IT department for the transition with the Logically and the IT match plan. Considerable amount of work there. They've had to provide a lot of data, provide tours of what's the facilities here, define what we need, where we are, where we're going. So positive kudos to them for that. The work for the administrative team for their audit work. We've had the new auditors in, so now they're wanting to refresh and get all new information. So historically in the past, we already knew what they wanted. They could easily submit it, but now they're having to come out with a lot more information. So they've done that real well. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. If there are any questions, I can address those.
Thanks, Lou. Any questions? Blake?
What was the reason to move from the .net to the .ca.gov?
It was a personal preference. We never really felt .net was appropriate. .ca.gov is more appropriate for a government agency. And we've had discussions with the IT department. We've actually talked about it for a very long time for the transition. We just didn't pull the trigger on it. But now that we went over to the transition, we thought that was the appropriate time. And it'll be consistent with what a lot of the other government agencies do.
Okay, other questions for LaRue? All right, seeing none, board comments. Any board members have any comments they want to offer for the good of the order?
I got a question.
Go ahead, please.
I heard rumor, Dan, that there is a proposed distillery going in on West River in Truckee. Have you heard that?
There's been.
An application?
Yes. Yeah.
And
The TTSA staff I know has dealt with.
Is this a good one?
He's asking about the distillery project.
I'm asking whether or not we've been asked about the possibility of a distillery and what impact or what kind of preparations are we making to be able to take care of the effluent.
So it's, maybe Old Trestle Distilleries.
I assume that's what is it Old Trestle that you're referring to?
It's on West River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
It's like a restaurant / distillery that may or may not get built.
Well, I just wondered if the application is viable.
Well, so they've been in our pre-treatment loop, and so we've been reviewing their plans. This is now, I'm going to say
3 years.
3 years. Yeah, 3 years.
Now, with that being said, is the agency capable of handling the effluent from a
We have
distillery?
that should we be having that discussion under this?
Yeah, I'm not sure where Director Cox is going. If you'd like staff to give a report on
Well,
that
I
at a
just
later
was
meeting.
wondering if we had been engaged in any kind of dialogue with
Yeah,
the
it sounds like,
applicant or the town of
yes,
Truckee.
we have.
Pick
We
that
have.
up, Jay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that conversation's been going on for about 3 years. Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Okay.
Cool. Any other? Yeah, Blake.
I think it was 2 weeks ago was Water Professionals Appreciation Week in the state, and so I just want to express my appreciation to everybody at TTSA for the job you guys do. It's an important job. I was chatting with Jay and Mike before the meeting that I just got back from a week-long trip to Washington, D.C., and one of the things I noticed out there was whether you were walking along the Potomac River or along Rock Creek Park, which is a nice riparian river that runs through the middle of the city, is signs saying, do not go in the water, raw sewage. Every time it rains, raw sewage gets in these bodies of water. And so we take for granted, I think, sometimes, the job we do and the importance that we can jump in every lake, stream, river up here, but that's not the case everywhere, and it was good to see the perspective. And again, it's important what you guys all do, and I want to, personally express my appreciation for you and your staff.
Thanks.
Second thing, totally different topic, is sort of like was notified yesterday in a different way that the State Water Board is holding on December 2nd a workshop on the impact of water conservation on the wastewater industry. They're pushing a lot of conservation stuff. There's a lot of concern. I don't know, we're probably not as impacted up here in Truckee as maybe bigger cities are, but take a look for that. It's probably something worthwhile sitting in on. I think is going to look at both, the collection side, which is important because of the TRI, as well as the treatment side, as you see higher concentrations and lower flows and stuff coming to the plant, probably in a greater state of decomposition and stuff. And so I think it would be great to make sure you sit in on that. So you should be able to find out. If I made a note to myself, I'll shoot something to you, LaRue, as well, with the links to those workshops.
Thanks, Blake.
Sure.
Other board member comments? None? Okay.
I make a
Go ahead.
motion that we move to closed session.
Got a motion to adjourn open session and move to closed session.
I'll second.
Second. Any public comment? None? Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay. Move to closed session. All right, so we are back in open session, and we do have a reportable item, and Dick Shanahan will provide the report out from closed session.
In the closed session, the board unanimously adopted Resolution 18-2021 with findings, deciding the appeal by former employee Nancy Chuba Barker. The board denied Ms. Chuba Barker's appeal and affirmed the decision to terminate her employment.
Thank you. And then notification will go to Ms. Chuba Barker.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dale, seconded by Mr. Smeltzer to adjourn the meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed?
Can I get you to sign the resolution?